Hello and welcome to The Hub, powered by Manpower of Richmond. I am your host, Michael Allen, and here on The Hub, we interview local business leaders, community partners, and various special guests. We share unique and untold stories of companies, organizations, and people who are making a difference in our community. Manpower of Richmond is a national brand, yet locally owned franchise. At Manpower, we are familiar with the challenges businesses face. It's tough recruiting and retaining qualified employees, and that's why working with Manpower is a smart, cost-effective solution. Our entire focus is talent acquisition, and we'll manage your hiring and training and provide ongoing customized support. Since 1966, we have been your community investing partner, uniquely positioned to help eliminate the hassles and save you time and money. Let us help. Contact Manpower today. To learn more, go to our website at mprichmond.com. So today's guest is Donna Girdley. She's a recently retired educator. Full disclosure, Donna was my fifth grade teacher going back 1974. And again, during all of my high school, starting in 1978 until I graduated in 1982. So welcome, Donna. Thanks for agreeing to come to the Hub today. So let me ask you, I kind of alluded to it, but how many years did you teach?
I just completed 50 years in the classroom.
So was that kind of your goal to try to hit 50, or is that just kind of worked that way?
It just worked out that way, but once I got to 45, I really wanted to get to 50.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. I think that's wonderful. So one of the traditions that we've tried to start on this podcast is asking, because of the association with Manpower, what your first job was.
My very first job, I was a waitress at Big Boy, Lias Brothers in Pontiac, Michigan. And just before that, I really had another job. Do you remember when computers were as big as a room?
Well, somewhat. I mean, I know they were.
They were, yeah.
I've seen pictures at least.
Well, I got hired by Spartan Industries in Sparta, Tennessee. They made clothing for JCPenney.
Okay.
And I hired in as an administrative assistant, but my boss wanted me to learn all that computer technology. So I ran a card hopper, I verified punch cards, a lot of it. And then I had that job at the Big Boy to go back to college.
So were you serving, I mean, like...
Food?
Yeah, I mean,
were
you like a... Back then they would call them waitresses. Now they're like servers.
Yeah. I was a waitress. I had to carry a platter full of food like this. That was pretty hard for me, but I did it. And it was great. It was great.
Yeah, that's cool. There's another
75 cents an hour plus my tips.
Well, that's, and I thought when I worked, because that was like my first job, fast food, at a place called Burger Chef. And you probably remember Burger Chef.
Yeah, I do.
But I made a lot more than you. I was making like $2.25 an hour. So,
75 cents an hour.
Now I don't feel so bad about that $2.25. So tell me a little bit about your story of like when you first came to Richmond,
Well, I started teaching school right after I graduated in 1972.
Okay.
And then my dad came back to Richmond, Indiana. He was assistant pastor at Hillcrest Baptist Church. And while I was teaching school in Florida, the lead pastor, Dr. Frank Holman, asked me if I would pray about coming back to Richmond and to help them start a school here. Mm-hmm. And that was quite an experience. I thought everything would already be ready, planned, but they were depending on me for that.
Right.
So.
Because that would that have been 74 when the school started, or was it
73?
73.
Yeah.
Okay. So you only taught 1 year in Florida, and then you came here in 73. Okay.
So I walked in and I said, "Where are we going to have the school?" And Dr. Holman told me that those modular buildings out back behind the church had been ordered, but they weren't here. Mm-hmm. And I said, "Well, who's ordering curriculum?" And he said, "Well, I don't know. We thought you'd know." So I had a real education about curriculum, and I had to work really hard, collaborate with other schools, try to find curriculum. We had 2 teachers the first year, and I taught first through third. And we had a part-time kindergarten teacher.
I mean, that's pretty amazing to be right out of college, 1 year of experience, and then being asked to set up a whole curriculum for a new emerging school.
And then get all the schedule in place and who was going to be where, when, and yeah, it was a I had to really depend on the Lord a lot.
Yeah, you had to really kind of grow quickly.
I did it all. Recess, lunch, taught 3 grades. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, I went to Hillcrest Christian School in '74, but I didn't have recall if that was the first year or the second year.
73.
Okay, all right. So going back to teaching, what made you decide to pursue the career of a teacher? I mean, what called you to do that?
I had a struggle with it at first because you, as one of my students, will know that I love literature. I love writing. I thought I might be doing something in journalism or editing. It's really, sometimes my family will say, "Are you editing me?" So, but I loved it. And the verse in Scripture that led me to that was Psalm 45:1. My heart is inditing a good matter, and I speak of the things which I've made touching the King. And my tongue is a pen as a ready writer. And I didn't know how God was going to use that. Mm-hmm. But early on in my career, I had strong content. My first degree was in English, and I was hired to teach middle school and high school English, and that because I had like 45 hours of writing and literature, and I loved that. But the Lord was dealing with my heart about continuing my education, which would come later, even at Hillcrest, to complete my another degree in elementary education, because he brought to my attention a verse that I still stand on that says, all your children will be taught of the Lord, and great will be the peace of your nation. And I think that's more true today than ever before.
Wow, that's wonderful. But...
And while I was at Hillcrest, you didn't know this, but I was working on completing my elementary education degree at the same time.
Well, my recollection of knowing you over the years, that you've always committed yourself to growing your knowledge. Mm-hmm. You have that additional degree, but did you go and do more later?
I did, and on that note, I think that if you are called to teach, first you love children. Mm-hmm. That has to be a priority. And then you need to love what you teach.
Right.
And thirdly, you need to continue to be a learner, because the day that a teacher stops learning is the day a teacher stops teaching.
I'm glad you say that about love, what you teach, because I really at times, especially when I went to college, I struggled with what I wanted to study. And by the time it was all over, I'd kind of stumbled into degrees that fitted me. Mm-hmm. But my boys, when I spoke to them later, I said, guys, whatever you do, whatever degree you choose to pick, make sure it's something you really love and have a passion for, and the jobs will come. Mm-hmm. That's what I told them. I think that turned out to be decent advice, but mm-hmm. I struggled so much initially, and it's because I was taking stuff I felt like I should take, not stuff that I wanted to take, So,
and I did finish my master's in education. It didn't come until I was almost 60, because money was always an issue as a teacher, but I was able to do that. So, yeah.
So, 50 years of teaching, maybe it came in different stages, but after now that it's somewhat done, looking back, what was the age group that you really enjoyed teaching the most?
That is a really hard question for me to answer. I did love my days in high school. I loved helping students learn how to read and think about what they're reading, to be reflective students of literature, had great conversations in the classroom. There was a time when I got to teach senior Bible, and I absolutely loved that. And then for me, even though I love the literature, and I went ahead and pursued my elementary ed degree, I love watching little children learn to read. And I feel that's such a foundation that's so important, because if children cannot read, learning is going to be hard. And I didn't want them just to learn how to read. I wanted them to love to learn to read. And that's why I worked really hard to find good books, good fit books for every child, not just a basal reader, other things to read that they were interested in, that would ignite their passion to learn more. And I loved being a detective. I think a first grade teacher, a second grade teacher has to be a good detective to really observe about why reading is hard for a child. So I loved journaling every night after school about what I saw in those children during the day. And sometimes it helped me to revamp a lesson plan for a guided reading group. It was exciting to me. And when the day came and that child could read to me and I saw the light bulb come on, it was such a day. I often refer to first grade as a labor and delivery room. We labor long and hard to learn how to put those letters and sounds together. And then the day comes and a child looks at you and says, I did it. I read it. That's joy for me. Real joy.
With our history, I was so thankful that both my boys had you as their first grade teacher. And I just was, I knew they were going to get a great start to their education because they had you as their teacher. And a lot of it was, the stuff that you just, the foundations of education, which I believe reading is. It's one of the huge foundations. And, what just makes me think, I remember when I had you in fifth grade, remember the combination problems we did, math?
Mental math.
Yeah
mental math.
That was like my favorite thing in class with you. And to this day, I can figure things in my head. My wife's a CPA, she's an accountant, but she can't add numbers like I can. She has the adding machine, that she depends upon. But I don't know if I'm super great at it now, but that was something that carried throughout my whole life, the ability to add things together in my head because of all that practice that we did.
The adding and subtracting and multiplying and dividing, and it was fun, and I think the class enjoyed it too.
Yeah, no, I love that part of your class.
But what's so funny about that, I'm not a math person. I'm a language person. I had to work hard to teach math.
Did you make all those up yourself, or did you have them as
I got them from another curriculum, but I worked it into what we were doing in math.
Yeah, no, I had a memory of that, and I just wanted to share that. I love doing those for some reason. What do you think your recipe has been for being able to teach kids for 50 years? I'm sure it was really challenging, physically exhausting, mentally exhausting.
Well, I think, it goes back to loving and having a passion for what you do and what you're teaching. And first of all, that passion comes from knowing your purpose. And I know the Lord called me to teach, but I also think there wasn't a day, except when it was COVID, that I did not love going in my classroom. But COVID taught me a lot. I'll never forget that day when we were told we were not going to be having school. And I thought at the time, maybe a week, maybe 2. I didn't think it would be the rest of the school year. And so on that day, the children packed everything up, took their things home with them, and it was a heartache for me, a literal heartache, that every day I couldn't go in my classroom. That classroom was my second home. Mm-hmm. And I remember walking in. We had to get packets ready for the parents to pick up every week. We did videos to try to teach the kids. And I was thankful that in our school that Mr. Metzger had gotten us ahead of the game with the technology, though I felt like the weakest fish with that. That was all new to me, and I had to do it all at once. But I remember walking in, getting things ready, and I entered that classroom. The desks were just like they were going home at the end of a school day. All of the manipulatives and all the reading tables and the books that I had prepared and laid out, it was just like, they should be there. And I remember very clearly asking the Lord, please help me do this. Give me the conviction and the compassion and the courage to keep teaching, even though my students are not in front of me. And help me never, ever to take that for granted again, of being able to walk in that room and being with those children and helping them learn. Teaching from a distance is hard, especially in primary grades, because you have to see their mouths, know if they're making those sounds correctly. You are always assessing, and from afar, that's much more difficult to do.
I wouldn't have done very well in that situation as a student, would I have? You're social. You're social. You were always social, and there's nothing wrong with that. God gave you those social skills because you have to have good people skills in business. And so God didn't waste that. I didn't ever look at that as a negative. But I just think that, given what you know about me, I think that trying to learn that environment would have been a real struggle for me personally.
It was hard for every student in this town, every student.
Yeah, I'm minimizing it, but I mean, some maybe excelled more than others, but it would have just been it would have been a train wreck for me. I just think it would have been awful.
And to address your question, the recipe, my heart was broken. My heart was broken when we had to stay home for the children, and I was missing them. So I think when you love what you do, you look forward to the day. Even when it's hard, you look forward to the day.
So I kind of went past part of your teaching career, because we talked about you came in 1973 and you were teaching at Hillcrest, but that job didn't last. I mean, that
school
came
closed.
What was that, like 89, 88, something like that? Somewhere
in there. Well, and I will tell you that during that time when the school closed, I had other jobs, but I was lost, really lost, trying to figure out where I would fit in. I was in other schools, but it wasn't the same. And then I learned that just because you have the background and you have the content doesn't mean that you're the person for the next job. They look at what you've done and they're interested, they hire you. But sometimes it was above, I felt like, my ability to be able to do how I wanted to do it. And so I learned from that experience that, God wastes nothing in our lives, but I think that's when I really knew I needed to be back in elementary education. It was just too much to manage with high numbers of students.
So because, the last part of your career, a significant part, was at Community Christian School here in Richmond. Yeah. And so what opened up the door for you to go to that school? What took you there?
It's really interesting to me because I mentioned to you that I felt lost. And when I prayed about coming here in 1973, to Stark Hillcrest Christian School, I clearly felt the Lord's leading on that. And he verified that through everything that I was reading in Scripture. And then when the school closed, I thought, Lord, did I not hear you correctly? I thought this was your plan. And so when the school closed, that was like a death to me, because I had invested a lot of time there.
Yeah,
a lot of years.
Personal investment.
Yeah, personal investment too. And so I was grieving that during that time I was not here. And then I got a telephone call from a board member, and he said to me, would you consider coming back? And what most people don't know is that Community Christian was formed with mainly parents from Richmond Christian who closed the following year, and parents from Hillcrest. Mm-hmm. And so the Lord was resurrecting what he started. The Lord always finishes. He always completes it. And in that school starting, and I was asked to come back, I didn't want to come back at first because I thought, Lord, I have done this. I don't want to start all over again. And Community Christian at the time was fairly new. And I knew what was ahead of me. And I was in Florida. I was walking the beach, and I kept saying, Lord, surely you want more from me than going and starting all over again. But his plan was to keep the school going. And he did. And it's been a miracle. It's just amazes me at all that God has done in that place.
Because having a private school like Hillcrest, I wasn't quite around when it closed, but money's a big deal, a big part of it.
To have a school, it is a work of faith. We didn't have school vouchers then like we do now. Parents didn't have school choice as they do now. But, we were always struggling to meet the bills and meet the payroll. I don't know if you know this story or not, but there was a time before the school closed, we really didn't know if we could reopen after Christmas. And my dad's nephew came to visit. And he loved my dad. My dad had talked to him a lot about the Lord and his need for the Lord. But he was a successful businessman. And he had his own plane, and he flew up here on New Year's Day. And Dad took him through the church, and we'd had a business meeting, and all the financial statement was on the back table for people to see. And he picked the statement up, and he looked at my dad, and he said, this is not very good. And he said, well,
stated the obvious.
Yeah. Well, and Dad said, we're trusting the Lord. We're trusting the Lord. And so he took him out back and showed him the school, and then we took them out to eat. This will date everybody here at this table. We took them out to eat to Howard Johnson's on New Year's Day. And then Dad, we were all went together, and we took them back to the little airport that's here where the plane was. And Dad got back in the car, and I remember my mom saying, well, how'd that go? And he said, it went really well. And she said, I saw him put something in your pocket. What did he put in your pocket? I don't know. He took it out. It was a check for $25,000.
And that was
when money was, a dollar was a dollar then.
Right. What year would that have been?
I can't remember. We were open a little longer after that.
It's the 80s. So, $25,000 in the 80s, equivalent to today's dollars would be a lot of money.
So the check was, I don't know if he made it out to Dad or not. I kind of think he did because he didn't know anybody else. So Dad didn't keep it. It was not, he took it straight to Dr. Holman. The next day in the office, they were just praising the Lord and paying bills, and it was a wonderful day. And every time there was a need, God took care of it until he says, it's done for now. But God had a better plan, and that better plan, I do believe, was to get the school out of the church. It was hard on the church. I mean, we were wearing their building out, even though there were a lot of contributions made by parents of the school. But God resurrected it. And now we have this school in town, and I'm so thankful we're here. But the one of the many things that I love about Community Christian is we work to try to collaborate with Richmond community schools. It's not about us or them. It's about working together for what's best for kids. And I think we do that well there. Yeah. And I say we because I still feel a part of the school.
So going back on, our time together as a teacher and student, I mean, I'm giving you some liberties here. I mean, to share with the audience any stories about me that you find fascinating or unique, or you think the public needs to hear about, or a look into my life at that time.
Well, when I had to wear many hats at the school there, but I taught a general business class. And in that general business class, there are all kinds of things that we had with the curriculum. But I remember a kit that you all had to complete and do. And I remember you and I think Jeff Crick, and I think there was Kevin Tyree. Somebody else was in that group. But anyway, you were struggling over a checking account balance that you couldn't figure out where the discrepancy was. And it was funny because you were playing a game and making bets, and I let you do it. I remember in 5th grade, was it Will or George Marling that was you were?
Will.
Okay, you and Will made me a bookcase because I needed a bookcase, and I loved that bookcase, and I had it for years and took it with me everywhere I went. But
I think I remember that because I think my grandfather helped us do that. David Levy, he helped us. I remember that.
Yeah, I needed that bookcase because I didn't have a place to put some books in the room.
Yeah,
and so that was, and I was so
forgotten
happy
about that.
Oh, I remember that well. And you had always a sense of humor, and you laughed a lot.
Well, I'm sure. I mean,
But I was not much older than the rest of you then, and it was really, it was hard for me to sometimes put on my teacher hat. So
well, when I was present in the moment, my thought process was that, this lady doesn't really like me that much, and then also that you were like, kind of.
Strict. I wasn't kind of.
We were probably the word that we were using was mean. But it's funny. That's just why I wanted to talk to you today. You go through life and you experience things, and then looking back now, I mean, definitely one of my most favorite teachers I've ever had.
Well, thank you.
And you talk about literature or teaching grammar, or whatever.
I taught grammar.
I'm proud to say that. When I graduated at Hillcrest, I graduated 7th in my class, but unfortunately there was only 7 of us in that class. But I think I was a kind of like a B, C student, and but it was interesting though, and I'll give you credit for this. Even though those are the kind of grades I got in English and grammar, B's and C's, when I went to Ball State, I excelled in writing. And I don't think I'm a great writer, but the level of instruction I got from you when it went to that level, it was not hard for me. And I had to write a lot of papers.
I know.
I had to write a ton of papers, especially when I worked on my master's degree. It was almost all writing all the time.
I know.
And there was that comical side of me. There was a little BS in my papers. Sometimes you just have to fill space. But anyway, it was. Thank you for that. Because,
you're welcome.
I feel like, and I still do quite a bit of writing today. I mean, I help staff sometimes. We talk about sending emails out,
right?
And it's important that those are written well.
Right. Right.
And so I'll say, well, this is what I think you ought to do, and what you ought to do. You write it, then give it to me, and I'll
edit it.
I'll help you. I'll help you formulate the sentences or whatever. And you know, I still struggle with speaking well at times but overall, you know, I get by okay.
You're doing fine.
So
you're doing fine.
So, you know, with your 50 years in teaching and so, you know, right now I think there's a teacher shortage.
There's a serious teacher shortage.
And, you know, what would be your advice or encouragement to someone who is a new teacher, and for them to stick with it, or someone who's considering going into education? I mean, what advice could you offer those folks to encourage them that it's a worthwhile endeavor and career?
Well, when you teach children or you're teaching high school students, you're teaching the future. Mm-hmm. And that's a big responsibility. And so I feel like sometimes teachers don't get the kudos they deserve.
Right.
There are lots of teachers in our community that are working so hard, and they go every day, and it takes courage, it takes confidence in what you're doing, and they love what they're doing. I think of an elementary teacher that I know right now that's teaching in one of our public schools. She works so hard, so incredibly hard, and does a wonderful job. And yet at the end of the day, when all the scores come back, it looks like she didn't do a good job. And I know she has. So if you know a teacher, I'm just going to put this out there. If you know a teacher, or you have children in the system, write a note to that teacher and thank them for what they're doing. It means a lot. It'll help them to go the next day. It'll carry them. But if you're thinking about teaching, first of all, make sure you're doing this because you love your subject and you love kids. If you love the kids, they can take a lesson that might not be a home run every day. But if they know you care about them, they'll work for you. But they have to know you care. Their parents need to know you care. And how that looks depends on the situation with each student. But let them know you're invested in them. And be content strong. And by that I mean, if you're going to teach high school English, there's a certain requirement of English hours you'll take. But take all you can take so that you are well prepared to prepare those students for what they're going to do in their world. I think that's important. I think you need to align yourself with a good mentor. You know, find a teacher that you admire and respect and say, I want to learn from you. Can you observe in my classroom? Will you help me with what you see that I could become better in teaching my lessons? I think that's crucial. And always keep learning. Always keep learning. The day you stop learning is the day you stop teaching.
That's awesome advice. One thing that I wanted to go back on, I kind of forgot early in our conversation, is I try to meet with everyone before we do this, and you're talking about how when you were teaching in your early teaching, you know, you weren't making that much money,
$78
and
a
you
week.
And you had to supplement your income. And I'd forgotten that you had worked as a manpower
employee.
Temporary.
Yeah.
So, and you were sharing, I think people are interested in hearing about some of those jobs that you did and what you thought about doing those.
And I was thankful for those jobs. I was thankful that Manpower took me as a temporary employee. I worked at First and Second National Bank one summer, auditing all of their car loans to make sure that the people that borrowed money for them had insurance on their cars. I did that one summer. And one summer I worked for General Telephone here in Richmond.
For you kids out there, that's Frontier today. Because some people won't know what
GTE. Yeah. And I was Mr. Coxey's administrative assistant for the summer. I met some wonderful friends there. I'll never forget why the Lord put me there for a reason too. And it was great. I learned to work a teletype, learned to read some teletype. I got mad one day when the teletype, somebody turned the print off. Mr. Coxey said, well, you're going to have to learn how to read that teletype. So it was great. And then I worked for Colorbox. I worked at Dana. Feel free to smile. It was in the foundry part.
Oh, really?
I did the work orders. I had to get the work orders because it was commission.
But you were out on the floor?
I had to take the work. When somebody got too hot out in the factory and had to go home, then I'd have to write up a new work order and take it out for the next person. Wore a hard hat.
No, early in my manpower career, I remember going when it was still here in Richmond. Yeah. Walking, molten metal.
Right.
It was.
I did that. Walk through there. I did at Alcoa. I'd worked. Will date me. A bill of lading typewriter.
Okay.
Had to remember not to use the shift key because it was already in capital letters. And when you work a bill of lading typewriter, you always have to check it against the account and the pieces that the contract is for, so they don't send too many parts out. And so the guy that was head of the loading dock would come and get me and go, where's that Indian girl? He called me an Indian girl. I don't think I look like an Indian girl, but he called me that. And
I don't think they would do that today.
I don't think they do that today.
I think HR would have some.
Yeah, they'd have a problem with that.
Have a conversation with that person.
It wasn't a problem for me, though. So I did that. I had some really good jobs. It kept me with a paycheck.
Yeah, did they ever try to say, hey, why don't you just stay here and we'd love to hire you?
Yeah, Mr. Coxey did.
At the GTE.
GTE. Yeah, and my mother really wanted me to take that job.
Yeah, well, I'm sure there was a difference in the income that you could have made that. Yeah. But I'm glad you stuck with what the teaching. Thank you. You've really impacted. How many kids do you think that you've taught over?
I don't know.
Put a number to it. How could
I have no idea. But I will tell you that one of the greatest rewards for teaching and staying with it is to see your students do well. Like here I'm today with you. Who gets to do that?
Yeah,
who gets to do that? And who gets to have their students' children in the classroom? I think that's unique, and I'm so thankful for that. And I hear from former students from Community Christian. Just a few weeks ago, I had a student who is expecting her first child. I had her in first grade at Community Christian. She's an emergency room doctor in Florida. And before she went to do her residency, she came by and visited me at school. This is before she was married. And she walked into my classroom, and she said, I just wanted to see where it all began for me, and I wanted to see you. There's no price on that. There's no price on that. And I saw her recently at a baby shower, and I reminded her. I said, "Do you remember what I told you when you first came in my classroom?" And she said, "I think so." And I said, "You have good hands, and the Lord's going to use those hands one day." She uses them every day in the emergency room, sewing people up.
Well, you had my son Peter in first grade, and I think you saw in him, as a first grader, traits that took him into his career today.
Yeah. Well, I remember what I told him. And, I said, the Lord has something so good for you. I think you could be a pastor. And he is.
And he is to this day.
And he is. And, and I will never, it was the National Day of Prayer. And we were all praying, and we had some music that we were singing. And it was, he was praying for the country we were struggling with in this country at the time. And he asked the Lord to enter and invade that person's heart as a 6-year-old.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
It is amazing. It is amazing.
Yeah. Well, I've been blessed with a couple of really wonderful children.
Yes, you have.
Sam and Peter, I'm extremely proud of.
You should be. You should be. But the 50 years of teaching for me, the Lord has allowed me to see what happens with all your children will be taught of the Lord, and great will be the peace of your nation. And I really stand on that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, I think that kind of wraps everything up that I was going to talk about. I'm so appreciative of you coming and just having this conversation with me. After I'm done, there's going to be so many things. Oh, I wish I would have asked Donna this or that or whatever. So what's next for you now that you've
retired?
Hung up your teaching hat?
Well, I never expected to retire this year, this past year. I would have gone on, tried maybe to get to 5 more years maybe, but the Lord brought this wonderful man into my life, and on September 30th, I am going to be getting married.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
And a whole nother chapter for you,
Yep.
and I wish to both of you the best,
thank you.
And I'm sure it's going to be just wonderful things will happen as a result of that. So
Yeah.
that's great.
Well, so the other thing before we wrap this up is just I want to encourage everyone that might be listening. Go visit your local school. See what you can do to support teachers.
Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with you with that. And so, well, for those of you that are watching this, make sure you pass on how they can watch this podcast. An easy way is just to go to the Manpower website at mprichmond.com, and we have several links there where you could just go to our episodes and watch it. So, again, Donna, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for investing in my life, and appreciate you so much. So
it was a privilege.
thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.